Welcome to National Narrative. My name is Jordan M. Kersey, and you are watching a specially made history about the nation of Colombia. Now, this could be a little lengthy, so if you ever need to just study specific parts of the history of Colombia, you could do that because this presentation is divided into chapters. So, hope you enjoy. Colombia is a country largely situated in the north of South America. Colombia is bounded on the north by the Caribbean Sea, the northwest by Panama, the south by both Ecuador and Peru, the east by Venezuela, the southeast by Brazil, and the west by the Pacific Ocean. The geography of Colombia is characterized by its 6 main natural regions that present their own unique characteristics. From the Andes mountain range region shared with Ecuador and Venezuela, the Pacific coastal region shared with Panama and Ecuador, the Caribbean coastal region shared with Venezuela and Panama, the Llanos or plains shared with Venezuela, the Amazon rainforest region shared with Venezuela, Brazil, Peru, and Ecuador, and the island areas comprising islands in both the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. The mountain ranges of Colombia are divided into 3 branches known as cordilleras: the Cordillera Occidental, the Cordillera Central, and the Cordillera Oriental, basically west, central, and east. The main rivers of Colombia are Magdalena, Cauca, Guaviare, Atrato, Meta, Putumayo, and Cauqueta. Did you know Colombia is home to the bizarre but incredibly beautiful Caño Cristales, a colorful body of water known as the River of 5 Colors, or the Liquid Rainbow? The multicolored waterway is a series of rivers, waterfalls, and streams located within the Parque Nacional Natural Sierra de la Macarena. The river's bed changes color between yellow, green, blue, black, and especially red, beginning the end of July and through November. Colombia is ethnically diverse, its people descending from the original native inhabitants, Spanish colonists, Africans originally brought into the country as slaves, and 20th century immigrants from Europe and the Middle East, all contributing to a diverse cultural heritage. The 2018 census reported that 49% of the Colombian population is mestizo, or of a mixed European and American Indian ancestry, and that approximately 37% is white. 9.34% is of African ancestry. Indigenous American Indians comprise 4.4% of the population. With an estimated 48 million people in 2019, Colombia is the 3rd most populous country in Latin America, after Brazil and Mexico. More than 99.2% of Colombians speak Spanish. Including Spanish, a total of 101 languages are listed for Colombia. Based on various studies and a survey, about 90% of the population adheres to Christianity, the majority of which are Roman Catholic. Colombia is a highly urbanized country with 77.1% of the population living in urban areas. Did you know one of the most interesting facts about Colombia is that it was the happiest country in the world, according to the 2013 and the 2014 Barometer of Happiness and Hope? Between 5000 and 1000 BC, hunter-gatherer tribes transitioned to agrarian societies. Fixed settlements were established, and pottery appeared. Beginning in the first millennium BC, groups of American Indians, including the Muisca, Zenu, Quimbaya, and Tairona, developed the political system of caciquismo, with a pyramidal structure of power headed by caciques, or chiefs. Most of the American Indians practiced agriculture, and the social structure of each indigenous community was different. Some groups of indigenous people lived in a state of permanent war, while others were more peaceful. Did you know the Book of Mormon contains the account of a group of people that emigrated from the Middle East and settled in the Americas around 600 BC? All of the Native American tribes are descendants of that group. Spanish explorers, led by Rodrigo de Bastidas, made the first exploration of the Caribbean coast in 1500. In 1508, Vasco Núñez de Balboa accompanied an expedition to the territory through the region of the Gulf of Urabá, and they founded the town of Santa Maria la Antigua del Darién in 1510, the first stable settlement on the continent. Santa Marta was founded in 1525 and Cartagena in 1533. Spanish conquistador Gonzalo Jiménez de Quesada led an expedition to the interior in April 1536 and christened the districts through which he passed the New Kingdom of Granada. In August 1538, he founded provisionally its capital near the Muisca Casco of Bacata and named it Santa Fe. The name soon acquired a suffix and was called Santa Fe de Bogotá. Two other notable journeys by early conquistadors to the interior took place in the same period. Sebastián de Belalcázar, conqueror of Quito, traveled north and founded Cali in 1536 and Popayan in 1537. From 1536 to 1539, German conquistador Niklaus Federmann crossed the Llanos Orientales and went over the Cordillera Oriental in a search for El Dorado, the city of gold. The conquistadors made frequent alliances with the enemies of different indigenous communities. Indigenous allies were crucial to conquest, as well as to creating and maintaining empire. Did you know El Dorado was the term used by the Spanish Empire to describe a mythical tribal chief of the Muisca people who covered himself with gold dust and submerged in Lake Guatavita? In pursuit of the legend, Spanish conquistadors searched what is today Colombia, Venezuela, and parts of Guyana and northern Brazil for the city and its fabulous king. In the course of these explorations, much of northern South America, including the Amazon River, was mapped. In 1542, the region of New Granada, along with all the other Spanish possessions in South America, became part of the Viceroyalty of Peru, with its capital in Lima. Important decisions were taken away from the colony into Spain by the Council of the Indies. In the 16th century, Europeans began to bring slaves from Africa. The Spanish Empire relied on the asiento system, awarding merchants the license to trade enslaved people to their overseas territories. The indigenous peoples could not be enslaved because they were legally subjects of the Spanish crown. To govern the indigenous peoples, several forms of land ownership and regulation were established, like resguardos, encomiendas, and haciendas. The Viceroyalty of New Granada was created in 1717. Its capital was Santa Fe de Bogotá. This viceroyalty included some other provinces of northwestern South America that had previously been under the jurisdiction of the viceroyalties of New Spain or Peru, and correspond mainly to today's Venezuela, Ecuador, and Panama. So Bogota became one of the principal administrative centers of the Spanish possessions in the New World, along with Lima and Mexico City. After Great Britain declared war on Spain in 1739, Cartagena quickly became the British forces' top target, but an upset Spanish victory during the War of Jenkins' Ear, a war with Great Britain for economic control of the Caribbean, cemented Spanish dominance in the Caribbean until the 7 Years' War. Did you know local government periodically imposes a dry law during major events such as World Cup matches and elections, prohibiting alcohol consumption in order to stem public violence? Since the beginning of the periods of conquest and colonization, there were several rebel movements against Spanish rule, but most were either crushed or remained too weak to change the overall situation. The last one that sought outright independence from Spain sprang up around 1810 and culminated in the Colombian Declaration of Independence, issued on 20th July 1810, the day that is now celebrated as the nation's Independence Day. The movement was initiated by Antonio Nariño, who opposed Spanish centralism and led the opposition against the viceroyalty. Cartagena became independent in November 1811. In 1811, the United Provinces of New Granada were proclaimed, headed by Camilo Torres Tenorio. The emergence of two distinct ideological currents among the patriots, federalism and centralism, gave rise to a period of instability. Shortly after the Napoleonic Wars, Ferdinand VII, recently restored to the throne in Spain, unexpectedly decided to send military forces to retake most of northern South America. The viceroyalty was restored under the command of Juan Samano, whose regime punished those who participated in the patriotic movements, ignoring the political nuances of the juntas. The retribution stoked renewed rebellion which, combined with the weakened Spain, made possible a successful rebellion led by the Venezuelan-born Simón Bolívar, who finally proclaimed independence in 1819. The pro-Spanish resistance was defeated in 1822 in the present territory of Colombia and in 1823 in Venezuela. The territory of the Viceroyalty of New Granada became the Republic of Colombia, organized as a union of the current territories of Colombia, Panama, Ecuador, Venezuela, parts of Guyana, and Brazil. The Congress of Cucuta in 1821 adopted a constitution for the new republic. Simón Bolívar became the first president of Colombia. However, the new republic was unstable, and 3 countries emerged from the collapse of Gran Colombia in 1830. Slavery was abolished in the country in 1851. Did you know, each year on August 7th, the people of Colombia celebrate Boyacá Day in commemoration of the Battle of Boyacá, which took place in 1819. This battle was one of the greatest battles ever fought in Colombia. This battle marks the day the country achieved independence. The War of the Supremes was a civil conflict in the Republic of the New Granada from 1839 to 1841. The Congress elected to close down monasteries in Pasto, Colombia, which sparked an uprising in the province and was supported by the Catholic Society of Bogota. José Ignacio de Márquez was the president. Many people wanted the president to send the popular general José María Obando to put down the uprising. Instead, the president chose other generals, and Obando felt like he had to escape political persecution. In July 1840, Obando decided to enter into open rebellion. Fearing a nationwide revolution, Marquez asked Ecuadorian President Juan José Flores for military aid in suppressing the revolt of Obando. Flores agreed because Obando by now was calling for the re-establishment of Gran Colombia, including Ecuador as a federation. Obando also was calling for a revolution in Ecuador against Flores. Obando was eventually defeated by Ecuadorian and Colombian forces. Unfortunately, local opposition in Colombia used President Marquez's dealing with Ecuador as an excuse to oppose his presidency. One after another, the opposition leaders in the provinces revolted. The rebel leaders declared the provinces sovereign states separated from Nueva Granada. They assumed the title of Supreme Leader of their provinces. The revolt had now changed from a religious uprising into a national conflict over federalism. The Supremos swore that they would not return to Nueva Granada until the country was organized as a federation. Of the 20 provinces in the country, 12 were now totally controlled by the rebels, and 4 others were partially occupied by them. Bogotá was firmly in government hands, but was largely unguarded. On September 29, 1840, Manuel González, Supremo of El Socorro, defeated the only regular government troops in the central part of the country. This victory increased the prestige of the revolutionary forces, whose ranks swelled. González proclaimed himself the supreme head of the independent state and went with his army to take Bogotá. President Marquez left Bogotá to join with his generals. González would have seized the unguarded Bogotá if General Juan José Nera, a distinguished hero, had not rallied the citizens and government forces and defeated González in the Battle of Buenavista. Nera was gravely wounded in the battle and died of his wounds a few months later. This unexpected victory allowed the return of Marquez, with his generals not far behind. During the week of November 22nd to November 28, 1840, rebel forces again threatened the capital. The entire population was mobilized for defense. Meanwhile, the government's division of the south approached, and the rebel army retired to the north. By this time, the rebels were unable to unite under a single leader. After their initial successes, this was a major element in their defeat. The Colombian Civil War began on May 8, 1860, and lasted until November 1862. It was an internal conflict between the newly formed conservative Grenadine Confederation and more liberal rebel force. The Grenadine Confederation was formed in 1858 out of the Republic of the New Granada. There had been a call for more autonomy from various member states of Colombia. In order to satisfy the member states and avoid secession, the central government created a number of sovereign states from the different regions of Colombia. The sovereign states were Antioquia, Santander, Bolívar, Boyacá, Cauca, Cundinamarca, Magdalena, and Panama. Thus, by the time of the formation of the Grenadine Confederation, Colombia consisted of a number of sovereign states, governed by the Congress of Colombia, as the office of vice president was abolished. Despite the creation of these states, the government under Mariano Ospina Rodriguez became centralist, contrary to the wishes of the states, who wanted more power and autonomy, thus increasing the levels of friction between the two levels of government. Among many angered by these laws was respected and popular politician, leader of the Granada Liberal Party, Tomás Cipriano de Mosquera, who denounced the laws as unconstitutional and rallied liberal support. On May 8, 1860, the newly appointed Supreme Director of War, Mosquera, declared the sovereign state of Cauca a separate nation from the Grenadine Confederation, and civil war broke out. The rebel force was from the newly seceded region of Cauca, composed of dissatisfied politicians, commanded by General Tomás Cipriano de Mosquera, its former president. The Grenadine Confederation, created a few years earlier in 1858 by Mariano Ospina Rodriguez, was defeated in the capital Bogotá, with Mosquera deposing the current president on July 18, 1861, forming a provisional government with himself as president. Mosquera continued to pursue the conservative forces until their final defeat in 1862. The resulting formation of the United States of Colombia would have significant cultural and economic consequences for Colombia. The Colombian Civil War of 1876, also called War of the Schools, was a civil war in the United States of Colombia that went on from 1876 to 1877. The causes of the war date back to approximately 1870, when members of the Colombian Liberal Party attempted to introduce public education for the Colombian states, while the Colombian Conservative Party advocated for putting education solely under the control of the Roman Catholic Church. The late 19th century was a period of instability in Colombian politics. During the period of 1892 to 1896, the Colombian Liberal Party was represented in the Congress by Luis Antonio Robles, while the presidency was occupied by Miguel Antonio Caro, a member of the National Party. Upon taking office, Caro took unpopular measures. Individual liberties and freedoms of the press were reduced. Censorship was introduced, and the government could arrest its political enemies without trial, arresting some and banishing others. On the 29th of January 1895, the Liberals rose under the command of General Siervo Sarmiento. Under the command of General Rafael Reyes, the National Party government army defeated the Liberal rebels. General Rafael Reyes benefited greatly from the heightened reputation he had earned from his victories, and went on to become president of Colombia. However, the victory over the Liberals did not permanently settle the conflict within Colombian society, which, within a few years, was again embroiled in civil war. The Thousand Days War was a civil war fought in Colombia from 1899 to 1902. The war was at first between the Liberal Party and the government led by the National Party. After the Conservative Party had ousted the National Party, the war continued on between the Liberals and the Conservative government. Caused by the long-standing ideological tug-of-war of federalism versus centralism between the Liberals, Conservatives, and Nationalists of Colombia. Tensions reached a fever pitch after the presidential election of 1898, and in 17 October 1899, official insurrection against the national government was announced by members of the Liberal Party in the Department of Santander. Hostilities began when liberal factions attempted to take over the city of Bucaramanga, giving way to active warfare. The war resulted in a conservative victory 3 years later, and ensured the continued dominance of the Conservative Party in Colombian politics for another 28 years. With an estimated 100,000 to 150,000 fatalities, the conflict was the deadliest and most destructive war in the history of Colombia. It led to severe economic, political, and social repercussions for the country, including a partial collapse of the nation's economy. Food for thought. Although the United States of America also warred over the social and political issues, most of those battles were kept in Congress and the Supreme Court. For example, in 1954, in the case of Brown versus Board of Education, the Supreme Court declared that segregation in schools according to race was unlawful. The United States of America's intentions to construct and control the Panama Canal led to the separation of the Department of Panama in 1903 and the establishment of Panama as a nation. Panama's separation was facilitated by the instability of the failed French effort to build the canal, the instability from the Thousand Days War, Panama's Declaration of Independence, and Panama's treaty with the United States, which sent the U.S. Navy to protect Panama from Colombian forces. In exchange for its role in defending the Republic and for constructing the canal, the U.S. was granted a perpetual lease on the land around the canal, known as the Panama Canal Zone, which was later returned to Panama under the terms of the Torrijos-Carter Treaties. The United States paid Colombia $25 million in 1921, 7 years after the completion of the canal, for redress of America's role in the creation of Panama, and Colombia recognized Panama under the terms of the Thompson-Urrutia Treaty. Colombia and Peru went to war from 1932 to 1933 because of territory disputes far in the Amazon basin. On the 1st of September 1932, President Luis Miguel Sanchez of Peru dispatched 2 regiments of the Peruvian army to Leticia and Tarapacá, both settlements located in the Amazonas department in present-day southern Colombia. The Peruvian military forces stopped several large trade ships from traveling to Leticia. The result of this was an explosion of Colombian patriotism. Laureano Gómez, head of the Senate minority, proclaimed, "Peace, peace, peace in Inner Colombia. War, war, war on the border against our despicable enemy." It was not until December 1932 that General Alfredo Vázquez Cobo of the Colombian Amazonian Navy reached the mouth of the Amazonian River, with a fleet of old ships that he had acquired in Europe. Within 90 days, Colombia organized a respectable military response to the Peruvian invasion. On the 30th of April 1933, Peruvian President Sanchez was shot dead. 15 days later, his successor met with the head of the Colombian Liberal Party to secure an agreement to turn Leticia over to a League of Nations commission. Colombia and Peru met in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, to sign a peace treaty. The war ended with a peace deal brokered by the League of Nations. The League finally awarded the disputed area to Colombia in June 1934. La Violencia, or the Violence, was a 10-year civil war in Colombia from 1948 to 1958 between the Colombian Conservative Party and the Colombian Liberal Party, fought mainly in the countryside. Its cause was mainly mounting tensions between the 2 leading political parties, which subsequently ignited after the 1948 assassination of the popular politician Jorge Eliezer Gaitán, a Liberal Party presidential candidate. His murder provoked riots and peasant-to-peasant violence throughout Colombia. La Violencia took place between the paramilitary forces of the Colombian Liberal Party and the Colombian Conservative Party, which organized as armed self-defense groups and as guerrilla military units. Both also fought against the paramilitary forces of the Colombian Communist Party. La Violencia is estimated to have cost the lives of at least 200,000 people. The conflict caused millions of people to abandon their homes and property. Censorship and reprisals were common against journalists, writers, and directors of news services. In consequence, many media figures left the country. The violence between the 2 political parties decreased when General Gustavo Rojas Pinilla deposed the president of Colombia in a coup d'etat in 1953 and negotiated a peace agreement with prominent guerrilla leaders like Guadalupe Salcedo and Juan de la Cruz Varela. After Rojas' deposition, the Colombian Conservative Party and Colombian Liberal Party agreed to create the National Front, a coalition that would jointly govern the country. The National Front ended La Violencia, and the National Front administrations attempted to institute far-reaching social and economic reforms in cooperation with the Alliance for Progress. Despite the progress in certain sectors, many social and political problems continued, and guerrilla groups were formally created to fight the government and political apparatus. The Colombian conflict began in the mid-1960s and is a low-intensity war between the government of Colombia, paramilitary groups, crime syndicates, and communist guerrillas such as the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia and the National Liberation Army, fighting each other to increase their influence in Colombian territory. The reasons for fighting vary from group to group. The FARC and other guerrilla movements claim to be fighting for the rights of the poor in Colombia to protect them from government violence and to provide social justice through communism. The Colombian government claimed to be fighting for order and stability, and to protect the rights and interests of its citizens. The paramilitary groups claimed to be reacting to perceived threats by guerrilla movements. All sides have engaged in drug trafficking and terrorism, and have been criticized for numerous human rights violations. On the 4th of July, 1991, a new constitution was promulgated. The changes generated by the new constitution are viewed as positive by Colombian society. Several guerrilla organizations decided to demobilize after the peace negotiations of 1989 to 1994. Did you know Colombia's second city, Medellin, was once the murder capital of the world with 17 murders every day in 1991? It has since undergone a renaissance and is now one of the country's main cultural hubs. The national flag of Colombia symbolizes Colombian independence from Spain, gained on July 20th, 1810. The color yellow represents the riches of the country, the wealth of the Colombian soil, the gold, sovereignty, harmony, justice, and agriculture, as well as the sun, the source of light. The color blue represents the seas on Colombia's shores, the rivers that run through, and the sky above. The color red represents the blood spilled for Colombia's independence, and also the effort of Colombian people, the determination and the perseverance. Although much of Colombia's history has been filled with war, modern Colombia is a nation devoted to establishing peace, both at home and in other nations. The administration of President Álvaro Uribe adopted the democratic security policy, which included an integrated counter-terrorism and counter-insurgency campaign. In February 2008, millions of Colombians demonstrated against FARC and other outlawed groups. The Colombian government of President Juan Manuel Santos and guerrilla of FARC-EP announced a final agreement to end the conflict. However, a referendum to ratify the deal was unsuccessful. Afterward, the Colombian government and the FARC signed a revised peace deal in November 2016, which the Colombian Congress approved. In 2016, President Santos was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. The government began a process of attention and comprehensive reparation for victims of conflict. A special jurisdiction for peace has been created to investigate, clarify, prosecute, and punish serious human rights violations and grave breaches of international humanitarian law, which occurred during the armed conflict, and to satisfy victims' rights to justice. Colombia's relations with Venezuela have fluctuated due to ideological differences between both governments. Colombia has offered humanitarian support, with food and medicines to mitigate the shortage of supplies in Venezuela. Colombia's foreign ministry said that all efforts to resolve Venezuela's crisis should be peaceful. Colombia proposed the idea of the Sustainable Development Goals, and the final document was adopted by the United Nations. Tejo is Colombia's national sport and is a team sport that involves throwing metal pucks or discs, which contain gunpowder and explode on impact. The game originated among indigenous groups around 500 years ago and was declared the national sport under law in 2000. Of all sports in Colombia, football is the most popular. Colombia was the champion of the 2001 Copa America, in which they set a new record of being undefeated, conceding no goals, and winning each match. Colombia has been awarded Mover of the Year twice. Colombia is a hub for roller skaters. The national team is a perennial powerhouse at the World Roller Speed Skating Championships. Baseball is popular in the Caribbean, mainly in the cities of Cartagena, Barranquilla, and Santa Marta. Good players have come from those cities who have played in Major League Baseball. Colombia was the world amateur champion in 1947 and 1965. The Colombian Space Commission is Colombia's government body for the promotion and use of space. It is in charge of promoting the development of space technology and communication satellites, as well as applications for the navigation and maritime transportation in Colombia. It also works in the observation and surveillance of the country's natural resources. It was created by presidential decree in July 2006. Libertad 1 is a single CubeSat built by the space program of the Sergio Arboleda University in Colombia. It is the first Colombian satellite sent to orbit. It was launched aboard a Dnepr rocket on April 17, 2007 from the Baikonur Cosmodrome, Kazakhstan, and became the first Colombian satellite to orbit the Earth. It used a telemetric payload to keep it in communication with the university. It was expected to have a 50-day lifespan. However, news reports 2 years after it was launched stated the satellite was still working and sending information, passing over Colombia twice a day. Did you know it is mandatory for radio and public television in Colombia to play the national anthem every day at 6 a.m. and 6 p.m.? Thank you for watching my video. Feel free to subscribe, comment, and share. Next week, you can expect a new video about the history of the nation of Russia.